Hello and welcome to the Kamla Show, where we bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers, and other newsmakers from in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. My guest today is Qamar Adamjee. She is the Associate Curator at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. From now through May 25th of 2014, there's a major exhibit on yoga. Titled Yoga, the Art of Transformation, this is the world's first major exhibition that explores yoga and its 2,005-year-old history. The artworks at the exhibition date from 2nd to 20th century. Could you give us an overall idea of what one could expect to see in the exhibition? There are some who probably cannot come to the exhibition, but what is it that they would be missing?
The exhibition traces through visual culture, and that is through some stunning examples of sculpture, manuscript paintings, illustrated manuscripts, film, photography, and prints, traces the many histories and paths of yoga over the centuries. So the earliest artwork is from about the 2nd century, and the latest artworks are from the 1940s. And through this collection and selection of spectacular examples of Indian art, mostly Indian art, we look at several different storylines, one of which is the ways in which yoga has permeated and has long been an integral fabric of Indian culture that goes beyond religious specificity. So at the beginning we see how Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs, Muslims, and of course Hindus have incorporated aspects of yoga thought and practice into their own teachings. We then look at the 3 core practices of yoga that have endured over the centuries, and that is the practice of meditation, of austerities or tapas that create spiritual heat, and then asana. And surprisingly, asana comes, I think, to a lot of our visitors, asana comes much later in yoga's history than we expect to, because today's understanding of yoga is very asana focused, but it's not until the earliest illustrated manuscript of asanas is from the 1600s, and that's very late. Then we look at the ways in which teachers have been absolutely pivotal in the transmission of teachings. A touch on the topic of the relationships between yoga and power, be it supernatural powers or siddhis or political power. The importance of place and landscape, be that in ashrams or monasteries or shrines and pilgrimage routes. Continuing on in time and in other forms of art, to look at the ways in which yoga and yoga practitioners have occupied a very integral place in Indian culture, not only religious sphere, but stories and legends and folk tales and music, as well as the ways in which yogis have been perceived of in Western imagination from the 1700s to the 1900s. Some yogis were among the most powerful political power brokers in medieval India. Some of them maintained close connections with kings and rulers as advisors, as beneficiaries of royal patronage. And so there have been mixed relationships between attachment to worldly goods and not. And this group of paintings, though, is a fantastic group, I think, that come from a much larger manuscript that describes the journey, the very difficult journey of 5 sages as they go through a long, perilous trek to reach the abode of Shiva. along the way, they come across many different temptations. They come across this golden city, for example, where the inhabitants of the city are devotees of Shiva, and we see that here with the rituals and worship of the linga at the center of the painting. Yet the city symbolizes all kinds of, it's a golden city with golden palaces and beautiful women and music and a mix of spiritual and worldly attachment. And but these 5 pilgrims do not get distracted by that. They remain focused on their goal, and
they're at the bottom of the painting.
And they appear in this manuscript. They appear multiple times in a single painting. So we first see them here engaged in worship at the shrine, and then they leave. They perform ritual ablution and purification in the river, and they leave. They don't want to be distracted by and held down by the material comforts, because they're on the quest to find Shiva's to visit Shiva's home. In another part of the manuscript, they arrive at a shrine that is along the way, shrine dedicated to Gauri, or Shiva's spouse. And a painting like this is just fantastic. I'm biased towards it, because you see a very, the artists have shown a craggy, mountainous, difficult landscape. You can just sort of, it's springtime because the flowers are blooming, but it still feels cold. You're way up in the mountains, and here at the bottom are the yogis who are bathing in the icy waters. They've got to be icy. And after they have ritually purified themselves, they shed their very, very meager belongings, which is really nothing. And they come to pay their respects to the goddess.
That's Gauri.
Gauri. And eventually then they, subsequently then, meditate under a tree around a fire. And here we get more of a clear sense of the cold, icy, difficult, physically challenging conditions that they have willingly subjected themselves to. And now in this example, they're wearing the animal skins. It's got to be much colder. You can sort of see it also in the white, craggy rocks. And yet every image, they have their prayer beads, and they look gaunt and skinny, and yet very, very focused on their mission.
So this is the Kedara pilgrimage to Mount Kailash that we spoke about. And this is from which century?
These are from the early 19th century. They're dated to approximately 1815, and they are actually from a famous artist's workshop in the Pahari Hills, Himachal Pradesh today. The artist Purkhu, who was a well-known master of his day, and had many artists working in his workshop. Photography that's invented in about the late 50s and comes to India almost a couple of years afterwards. So by 1861, there are both European photographers actively practicing in India, as well as Indian photographers who have active studios. And things do become very complicated by the time you get to the 19th century, because India is officially in 1857, 1858, colony, and so this colonial civilizing mission, which is political on one end, mixed in with religious missionary activity at the same time, frames India and Indians in a sense, from the lens of a glorious ancient cultures and civilization that has now lost its edge, that has now lost its great glories. It's now become somewhat degenerate. And the yogis become common and very immediately accessible visual motif to epitomize that type of decline.
So this fakir that we see on a nail of beds, would that be considered degenerate?
Well, it's sort of from the missionary perspective, and here we have a fantastic postcard that on the side of it says, Hindoo Fakir, for 13 years this old man has been trying to find peace on this bed of spikes. And it's published by the Young People's Missionary Movement in New York. So the implication here is that if you're trying to find enlightenment or trying to find peace, the lying on a bed of nails is a misguided way of doing so, and by implication, instead, you should be going to church, you should be following Christian teachings. So it becomes, as I said, a complicated, intertwined phenomenon in which religion, politics, and visual culture such as, or visual technologies such as photography, each play into and further each other's individual agendas. And yogis become perceived in this negative, derogatory fashion. We shift to looking at the ways in which yogis and yoga practices have been variously seen by Europeans and Americans from the 17th century onwards. And this grouping that we are standing in front of right now touches on a late 19th century phenomenon in particular, which is where yoga and yogis became associated with stage magic as a form of entertainment. And earlier on in the exhibition, we talk about the acquisition of siddhis, or supernatural powers, that come as a fruit of yoga practice, and which enable the individual to acquire the power of flight, or to be able to read other people's minds, or possess bodies of other beings, etc. But those sort of associations were picked up not only by Indian magicians, as in for popular entertainment, but also for Europeans and Americans. And so here we are in front of two promotional materials for a famous magician of her day by the name of Coringa. And she was Renée Bernard, born in south of France. And she was presented herself to the world as the only female fakir in the world, or the first female yogi. In her acts, she talked about death-defying acts and levitation and being able to command other beings. In this case, she was best well known for her work with alligators. I have a rare and wonderful film dating from 1902, made by Thomas Edison, better known, I guess, for his light bulbs. If you look at the settings, this sort of Indian architecture, but combined with it are costumes that are really not very Indian. They're not, they sort of look Turkish, but they're not even Turkish. They look vaguely Persian, but they're not. Yet he is a Hindoo Fakir. There's nothing Hindu about him visually. There's nothing Fakir-like about him visually, nor about his assistant. So, but this fits in to the popularity of stage magic. And Indian magicians themselves, so who were never claimed to, not necessarily claimed to be yogis, they were entertainers, would also draw upon aspects of yoga powers. I mean, they would even, instead of saying chants like abracadabra, they would start with jantru, mantru, shakti, something or the other, words that vaguely sound Sanskritic, vaguely sound yogic, but are really stage
Made-up
theatrical made-up words. And so the Indians were doing it. It was picked up as much and as actively by Europeans and Americans, and it became more mainstream and goes viral again through technology.